Hi, I'm Roland Beard from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I would like to give a second video talking about trombone technique with the slide. I have found that through my years of teaching that one of the most misunderstood instruments is the trombone because of the slide. With all instruments like woodwind and brass instruments, you have a valve or a key to push down, which gets an instantaneous reaction. So with the slide, it takes a much different technique that I'd like to discuss today. First of all, before you talk about trombone, you first have to understand the overtone series, or what the steps of the trombone are with each position. So I'm going to just kind of talk through them real quick. So the first primary note of the trombone is called the pedal tone. I'm going to start with a low B flat pedal, meaning it's the lowest note that the trombone is capable of playing. It requires to be quite warmed up, so we'll see if I can get it out here. So that's the pedal B flat. Then we go to the next one, which is an octave, and that's the next B flat. Then you go to a fifth, which is an F, a fourth B flat, major third D, minor third F, another minor third, but it's a really flat minor third, so it's really not usable on the trombone. It's an A flat. And then the final octave I'm going to go through talk about today is the high B flat. As I said, with that seventh partial, which is an A flat, that's really flat, you can't use that on the trombone because there's no way to adjust your first position in. However, when you're in second position, we have the same series of notes, which are just a half step down. Now when we have the high G, which is a second position, now you can shorten that G with the slide to bring it into tune. So I'm going to play a lower G. Here's the middle octave G. And here's a high G in a normal second. You can see by bringing the slide in just slightly, I bring it in about that far. That brings it into tune. I always tell my students that when you move your slide that far, in reality you've actually moved your slide that far, because everything is doubled because you have a top slide and a bottom slide. So everything you move happens in both slides. So everything is doubled. The next series is the A flat. Again, everything is an octave, the same series. Then we get to that high G flat, also F sharp. That needs to be a short third. So I'll play an F sharp in the low range, and a high F sharp in a normal three. You can see I bring that into tune just by pulling the slide in a little bit. The most common ones I use in the short series is the G in 2, the G flat or F sharp in a short 3, and I'll quite often actually use that F in a short 4. And I'll talk about that when I get into the legato technique with this trombone. Next, I would like to talk about the legato style on the trombone, because that is the most misunderstood concept in trombone playing. So the first part I want to talk about is if the note and the slide move in the same direction. What that means is, for example, if I'm going from an F down to an E, back to an F, the note goes down, the slide also goes down. So it's the same direction. So if I don't use my legato tongue, here's what happens. You get that glissando. So what you do is you add a legato tongue, which I call it a da tongue or a do tongue. So if I add that legato tongue, here's what you get. Now also notice that my technique when I use the legato is I move my slide very quickly from position to position. I find that a lot of students don't move their slide fast enough to get to position. Now I'm going to go down to E flat from F. Again, I'm going to use the legato tongue. Just an explanation on the legato tongue. To understand it, I always tell my students to use a da or a la. Probably a da is the most easiest comprehended. So then I say, whisper 4 T's in a row. So they say, ta, ta, ta. Then I say, whisper 4 D's in a row, and they go, da, da, da. Then I ask them, what is the difference between a T and a D? And a lot of times they don't really quite understand, so I explain it this way. A T is an explosion of the air off the tongue. You've learned how, since you were young, first learned how to talk, you learned how to explode the air off the tongue. But when you say a D, which is normally accompanied with a voice, but of course when you're whispering, there's not going to be any voice on the D. It's a slow release of air on the tongue. Da, da, da. So a T, ta, and a D, da. So then what I have the student do to get the concept of legato tonguing done is I just stay on the same note, and then I, for example, on an F, I'll have them do 4 tongues in a row of legato. And make sure you stress that there's no space between the notes as far as the air. It's a constant flow of air. Again, I'll do that again. Down to E flat. D. And on down the line and so forth. And once I get a feel for how that tongue works, then I like to contrast it with a normal articulation. So you can hear the difference. And then when you apply that to my playing, like for example moving my slide, the timing is extremely important. Make sure you move the slide after the tongue and not before the tongue. So here it is again. So I'm going to move the slide a little bit before the tongue. Listen what happens. See, you still get the gliss. So if you have a late slide and a fast slide, it takes away that glissando. The next part of my teaching with the legato style is I talk about with the note and the slide go opposite directions. So for example, if an F up to a G, I always point out that the note goes out, but which way is the slide going? Slide's going down. That's opposite. Note up, slide down. So now you can do that without any tongue at all. So I'm going to go F up to G, first to fourth position, without any tongue. Once they understand that concept, you can always ask them later on when they're playing a note, and you ask them, do you use a tongue, or is that a no tongue? Is that a natural legato, or is that a legato tongue? Now, another rule you need to understand is if you have a series of notes that are all under the same legato, and if you have a mix of both legato and non-legato notes, you need to tongue them all. But make sure the natural legato tongues are very, very, very light. So it's going to be a lighter tongue than if the notes that require a light tongue. Now the next thing we talk about when we're talking about trombone technique is the alternate positions. That's probably one of the most misunderstood parts of trombone playing. I do have a sheet that I have printed out, and if you would like a copy of that sheet, just email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. It's rlbeard, B-E-A-I-R-D, 1963@gmail.com, and I can send you that sheet. So I'm just going to talk through some of the most common alternate positions and why I would use these alternate positions. So the first one I talk about is the C, middle C up to the D. If you were to go normal, people would go 3 to 1 on that one. But you're going in extra position to get through 2, so you can actually go to 3 to 4, and that saves your slide. But be aware that that D is a sharp note, so you need to slightly extend the slide out to make that into tune. So you notice the note is going up, but if I do the 3 to 4, which way is the slide going? It's going down. So then you get that natural legato. Another alternate position is 5th position B flat. So if I'm already out to 5, rather than go 5 to 1 to go G flat to B flat, just stay in 5. And allows for a much easier technique, especially when you're using the legato style. And then if you want to add to that, you can play F in 6. So if you have a lot of G flats in music and you have an F following a G flat, you probably want to use 6th quite often on your F. Now I'm going to do that all in the normal positions, 1, 5, 1, 5, and watch what happens. I have to work so much harder where I can just go. Makes the technique much easier. The other position I use quite often as an alternate position is the high F as a short 4. Now when I do that one, again, typically use it as a legato tongue. Let's think about that. So the E flat going up to F, the note's going up, the slide's also going up. So you need to use the legato tongue. But if you use a short 4, I can go much quicker. And one last alternate position that is quite often used is the low C in 6th position If you have an F down to a C, you can just stay in 6. Those are a lot of the techniques that I find will be helpful if you can start getting your students used to using those. I always talk about alternate positions right away with the students. If you plant that seed in their head, talking about alternate positions are good, they're not mandatory, but just try it out and see if you can get comfortable with it. And once they get comfortable with it, I find that students like to actually use the alternate positions quite often. One last thing I'd like to talk about is the hand position on the slide, because that's also something I see done not very correctly or not very consistently. I always talk about make a scissors with your hand and then grab the lower slide and the upper slide and then just put your fingers on the bar. So again, lower slide, bottom 2 fingers, upper on the top of the slide, the top 2 fingers, grab with the thumb and the fingers, and that gives you really good control on the slide. I do have a Zoom account set up, so if you have any interest in having some of your students take lessons with me online, you can contact me. I have a phone number of 605-360-1853, or you could contact me via email at rlbeard, beard, 1963 @gmail.com. Thank you.